Hello! Welcome once again to Stuff and Things, where I like to talk about stuff and occasionally even things. I'm your good friend Bradley, and today, hey, let's clean an AR-15, shall we? We've got one right here, ready to be cleaned. It's not horribly dirty. It's had a couple hundred rounds through it, perhaps at the range. It's not a crazy white glove, you know, you've been shooting 1,000 rounds through it and now you need to scrub every little part, but just sort of the general cleaning that I would do after I've been to the range. And as usual, with any video like this, there are going to be people who are very, very emphatic about the products they use, the procedures they use. It's okay. Just relax. This is what I like to do. This is how I like to clean my rifle. And like I said, this isn't every time I clean it. This isn't a particularly deep clean. This is just a go to the range and, you know, clean it up a little bit sort of clean. And also the products, you know what? Unless you're using muriatic acid or something on your rifle, for the most part, the commercial products available will probably work. And I like to use Ballistol a lot for just a general cleaning. If I had a lot of carbon fouling, or more like a lot of brass and lead fouling in the barrel, I might use a more potent bore cleaner like Hoppe's or something like that, but Ballistol works just fine for an after the range kind of cleaning. And there's other products, you know, there's CLPs and stuff like that, but I'm just going to show you what I tend to do. You don't have to agree, but this is just my method. So first things first, let's make sure the bastard is not loaded. Empty magazine, we'll just put that to the side. There we go. And pull the bolt back. There is nothing in the chamber, as you can see. Bam. So let's take it down here, push down the pins. I like to take it apart completely. Some people will just take the back, take down pin out and clean it that way, but I like to pop the whole thing off. Makes it a little easier in my opinion. If I can actually get this. Ugh. Come on, baby. Don't make me lose a fingernail here. There we go. Still pretty tight. And I just painted this recently, so there we have it. Now the first thing I like to do, we'll put the lower aside for now, and I will get a little microfiber cloth here. We'll put it down. Okay, so let's yank out the bolt. Put that there. Got the charging handle there. And one of the first things I like to do is actually take my Ballistol. Let's get our little straw here. And I will just spray down the chamber. You can't see any of this. I will spray down the chamber. I'm running low on Ballistol. And into the barrel. And I'm going to want to let that sit for a while. And then I might also spray a little bit just around the inside of the upper receiver. Let it do its job. Put that aside for now. We've got our bolt, our charging handle. Now you don't necessarily have to disassemble the bolt completely every time you do just a general cleaning after going to the range, but I usually like to pull everything out. So you pull the firing pin, retaining pin, knock that firing pin out, then you rotate your cam pin here, pop that out, pop the actual bolt out, and there you go. I don't usually fool with, you know, taking apart the extractor and everything. You can. If I were going to be doing a super involved cleaning, I would probably take apart the extractor and everything, but for now I'm just going to leave it on the bolt. And what I will do with these is just give them all a little douse of the Ballistol. I don't know why I'm not getting any spray out of this. Even going to spray in here. Now don't worry, I'm going to clean all this out. Don't want to spray it in your gas key. So all of that gets a chance to work. In terms of things like the charging handle, you know, I'm not going to do much with that. I'm just going to give it a little wipe down. Doesn't get too dirty for the most part. Well, actually it did get pretty dirty in this instance. And the lower receiver, for the most part, you don't need to do too much. I might just kind of rub out the mag well. Nothing much there. You're not going to get much fouling in here at all anyway. And I usually do not pop out the buffer spring and oil that. I don't really see much need. So the lower receiver is pretty much done for a lighter cleaning like this. Now with the firing pin, just give it a little rub down. That's clean enough for me for now. Same with the cam pin. Not too horribly concerned with this at the moment. Clean enough. The bolt assembly. Now, a lot of people like to try to scrape all the carbon they can off of this area of the bolt itself. You know, you can, for the most part, the wear points are going to wear off the carbon themselves, if you know what I mean. So on this area, you'll see on this part of the bolt, there isn't a lot of carbon buildup because that's where it wears. So you might want to get in there with a tool every once in a while and scrape some of that off. I don't worry too much about it. It's not a big deal to me. I might get in the little ballistol on a Q-tip like this. I might get into there to where the extractor is. I might grab a pipe cleaner and get into some of these areas of the bolt. Now you are going to get some residue from the pipe cleaner, so you have to make sure you get that out of there. You don't want these little bits of cotton residue stuck in there. But pipe cleaners can be useful. But I would call this bolt good enough for now. That'll do the job. So the firing pin, the cam pin, the bolt itself are fine at the moment. With the bolt assembly, I'm just going to give it a rub down. If it's looking really nasty, I might get a nylon brush like this and really go to town on some of the surfaces. This isn't looking too bad, but maybe I'll get in there a little bit. And then what I would do is just take a patch after that, go inside. Not gonna get much on there. Take a clean patch. There's a little bit of fouling in there. You'll get some in between the gas key and the body of the bolt carrier. You might just want to rub that down a little bit. And you can sort of use, some people like to use dental picks, polymer picks, things like that, and get inside. I find that this smaller nylon brush does a good job. But that's about it. You don't have to go too crazy with this. Just make sure you don't leave a bunch of residue of cleaner or ballistol, whatever you're using, gunked up everywhere. I'll show you where I like to put lubrication afterwards, but that's a pretty clean bolt carrier group, or bolt carrier. The upper receiver has been soaking in ballistol for a little bit. You can see the chamber there. I don't always go at it with the chamber brush, but I think I will today. So if you have a brush like this, you have this nice little tuft there, so you can really get into that star chamber and clean that out. And what I would do, I just get a little rod like this. And since we've already got some ballistol in there, give a little in and out in the chamber. Nothing too crazy. And then I will just take a clean patch inside and just kind of wipe everything down. And this is where you could use your polymer picks, or in my case, I'm just going to use my little nylon brush. Get in there. You're not going to want to put anything in the gas tube. Some people think they need to clean out the gas tube. You don't. Kind of like using the ballistol because it sort of ends up giving a little barrier. It kind of creates a finish on the metal that builds up over time that seems to just leave it slicker and protected after a while. So you can see we got off quite a bit of dirty nastiness from there. Now we've also got, I don't always punch the bore, and I don't usually use, you know, like I've got a jag I could use some patches on, or 22 caliber copper or a brass brush. I don't love the idea of brushing the bore on this. For the most part, I would probably just use a bore snake, if that. But again, I'm just gonna give it a little spray. Actually, I've already sprayed inside there, so I'm just gonna spray my bore snake a little bit just on this point. And we're just gonna run this through a couple times, and that will be more than enough. Handy dandy little feature with the bore snake is obviously a 22 caliber bore snake works on the 223 caliber. We will just pull this through. Ugh. There's one time. Let's do it one more for good measure. There we go. Now I may or may not put a little spray on a cloth and wipe down the muzzle device, things like that. Sometimes I'll take the magazines that I was using that day and just kind of wipe off the feed lips and stuff, but for the most part the magazines aren't going to get super dirty. Not a big deal. This was mostly important if you're using a suppressor. This is a suppressor mount flash hider, so you want to make sure you don't get a lot of carbon buildup and stuff on there because the lockup won't work as well, but you're not going to get a ton just from shooting. So I'll put a little on there, wipe it down. Now the lubrication points on the lower, you shouldn't have to do this very often, but if you were going to be lubing anything, you might put a drop of oil there on the selector switch where it meets the lower receiver. You might put a dot or two on the hammer pin and on the trigger pin. I think these had plenty of oil on them right now, so I'm not going to bother doing that. And like I said, I don't oil the buffer spring inside here. I think just the bolt going back and making contact with this probably distributes enough oil back there anyway. With the upper receiver, I don't do anything. I don't spray lube in here. One thing I'm seeing that I want to get is behind this buffer tube, or not buffer tube, gas tube. Some nastiness. That's where these Q-tips can come in handy. You can see that. Nasty. And the chamber just a little bit more. Like I said, this isn't a white glove cleaning. This is just, you've been to the range, you fired a couple hundred rounds. So it's time to reassemble the bolt. I will usually just take a patch, give it a little light coating of ballistol, and just do a nice light little rub down of the bolt. Not a ton. And you put that in with the extractor side facing out or to the right of the weapon. Line that up with your cam pin hole. The cam pin itself, I will probably just put a little bit of oil on. Not a ton. Whatever your lube of choice is. Flip that over to 90 degrees. And you just want to make sure that your bolt comes out fairly easily. And that seems just fine. And we take our firing pin. And our firing pin retaining pin. Like so. Make sure your firing pin is not going to fly out. It is retained properly. And I might just wipe down the entire bolt assembly with a little bit of that ballistol patch. For the charging handle, I might just put a drop of oil there, maybe one there. Oh, that's a little bit much. Just a little bit of oil on the charging handle. The bolt assembly itself, now you can use whatever lubricant you like, and you'll see that there's these 4 raised areas, one here, 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 and here, where you can see the wear developing on the bolt carrier. So that's where you're going to want to lubricate. Some people will use a CLP, some people will use grease. I've been experimenting with this Tetra gun grease lately. I'm not sure if I'm a huge fan yet. It's working fine, but it gets a little separated in the bottle. So you have to squeeze a little out, make sure you're getting the proper grease. I like that it stays where it is. It doesn't seem to stay insanely wet though. It seems like it may kind of dry out a little bit eventually. So that's something to bear in mind. It seems great for, putting a bit on here. It seems great for pistol slides, things like that. And I'm trying it with my AR at the moment. But any gun grease you like, any lubricant that you're into will work just fine. Make sure you're not afraid to get that bolt carrier pretty wet. Seems to me like you can shoot your gun for a long time when it's dirty, but when it's dry, not so much. So let's get this charging handle in there. Like so. Make sure your bolt is forward here. You don't want it back like that, you want it forward. And you can take your lower and upper and mate them back together. And then you want to just make sure that everything is working properly. We are unsafe. The weapon does not fire. We are unloaded, obviously. No worries about that. Flip it on to fire. Yes. Now we haven't screwed with the trigger group anyway, so this should be fine, but it's always kind of a good idea to check. Reset. Yes. Yes. Everything's good. And then we can put it on safe. we're good. And you might just want to work that lube on the bolt in a little bit. So everything seems to be working. That's working just fine. That's just your basic after the range, not super deep clean, but enough to make sure that you're gonna just keep on keeping on. There you go, gang. Feel free to scream at me about what I've done wrong in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching. I've been your good friend Bradley. You've been the audience. This has been Stuff and Things, cleaning an AR-15. I'll see you later.